December 1122. In the heart of medieval Aquitaine, a girl is born who will defy every expectation of women in her age. She is Eleanor, destined to inherit the largest duchy in France and become the most powerful woman in 12th century Europe. But power in the medieval world means marriage to kings, and marriage means surrendering control to husbands who view wives as property. Eleanor will refuse to accept this fate, challenging to kings, leading rebellions, and paying the ultimate price for her defiance. This is the story of the woman who married to kings but bowed to neither, who chose imprisonment over submission. She will reshape the political landscape of Europe through sheer force of will and strategic brilliance that outmatched royal courts. This is Eleanor of Aquitaine, the medieval queen who proved that some women could never be conquered, only temporarily contained. Born around 1122 in southwestern France, Eleanor inherited the vast Duchy of Aquitaine at age 15, making her Europe's most eligible heiress. Her father, William X, had died suddenly during pilgrimage, leaving Eleanor with lands stretching from the Loire Valley to the Pyrenees Mountains. The duchy was larger and wealthier than the royal domain of France itself, encompassing Poitou, Gascony, and the prosperous wine regions. But medieval law meant that unmarried women, no matter how wealthy, remained vulnerable to political marriages arranged by male guardians. King Louis VI of France immediately recognized the opportunity, arranging Eleanor's marriage to his son Louis VII to gain control over Aquitaine. At age 13, Eleanor found herself heir to vast territory. Shortly afterwards, in 1137, her protector married her off. She was barely 15, and he 16 when they married in July 1137. Their union intended to establish royal authority over her lands. Within months of the wedding, Louis XVI died, and Eleanor found herself Queen of France at 16, crowned on Christmas Day. But the marriage revealed fundamental incompatibilities that would define Eleanor's lifelong struggle against male authority and religious orthodoxy in medieval society. Louis VII was pious, ascetic, and dominated by his religious advisors, while Eleanor was worldly, independent, and politically astute beyond her years. She brought the sophisticated court culture of Aquitaine to Paris, introducing troubadour poetry, courtly love, and intellectual discussions that scandalized the French. Her flirtatious nature and political ambitions created considerable scandal among French nobles, who expected queens to remain silent and decorative. The couple's first major conflict came during the Second Crusade in 1147, when Eleanor insisted on accompanying Louis to the Holy Land. She brought 300 ladies-in-waiting and transformed the crusade into a courtly expedition that horrified the French clergy and military leaders. In Antioch, Eleanor reunited with her uncle Raymond, who welcomed her with lavish celebrations that further scandalized her pious husband. Rumors spread that Eleanor was having an affair with Raymond, though the truth was likely political. She supported his strategic plans. When Louis refused to support Raymond's military objectives, Eleanor publicly opposed her husband, threatening to seek annulment of their marriage. Louis essentially kidnapped his own wife, forcing her to continue the crusade against her will, a move that destroyed their relationship forever. The crusade was a disaster, and Eleanor returned to France determined to escape a marriage that had become a prison. After 15 years of marriage, Eleanor and Louis had produced only 2 daughters, Marie and Alex, with no male heir for France. In 1152, they obtained an annulment on grounds of consanguinity. They were distantly related, providing legal justification for ending the marriage. But Eleanor's freedom was brief, as unmarried women of her status remained vulnerable to forced marriages and political manipulation by male relatives. 2 months after her annulment, Eleanor made the most audacious move of her life, marrying Henry II of England by her own choice. Henry was 11 years younger, Duke of Normandy, and heir to the English throne, but most importantly, Eleanor chose him herself. The marriage united Eleanor's Aquitaine with Henry's Norman and English territories, creating an empire stretching from Scotland to the Pyrenees. When Henry became King of England in 1154, Eleanor was crowned Queen of England, now ruling a larger empire than any European monarch. But Henry proved as controlling as Louis, expecting Eleanor to produce heirs while remaining politically invisible and subservient to his will. Eleanor bore Henry 8 children, including future kings Richard the Lionheart and John, securing the Angevin dynasty's succession for generations. Yet motherhood didn't satisfy her political ambitions, as Henry increasingly excluded her from governance of territories that were rightfully hers. By the 1160s, Eleanor had established her own court in Poitiers, patronizing troubadours and creating the sophisticated culture of courtly love. She turned her court into a center of learning and literature, promoting the ideal of courtly love that elevated women's status. But cultural influence was enough. Eleanor wanted real political power over the land she had inherited and the empire she helped create. The conflict with Henry intensified as their sons grew older, and Eleanor began supporting their claims to independent rule over inherited territories. She believed her sons should govern Aquitaine, Normandy, and other territories as autonomous rulers rather than as Henry's subordinates waiting for inheritance. In 1173, Eleanor made her most dangerous move, supporting her sons young Henry, Richard, and Geoffrey in open rebellion against their father. The Great Revolt was carefully planned, with Eleanor coordinating support from French nobles who resented Henry's growing power across their borders. She tried to join her sons in France but was captured by Henry's forces while attempting to cross the border disguised as a man. Henry imprisoned Eleanor for supporting the 1173 revolt against him by their sons young Henry, Richard, and Geoffrey throughout the kingdom. Her capture marked the beginning of 15 years of imprisonment that would test every ounce of Eleanor's legendary strength and determination. She was held at various locations, including Old Sarum in Wil, kept in comfort, but stripped of all political power and freedom. Henry used her imprisonment as leverage over their rebellious sons, knowing they would moderate their opposition to protect their mother from harsher treatment. Eleanor's imprisonment became legendary throughout Europe, transforming her from controversial queen into a symbol of resistance against male tyranny and royal oppression. During her captivity, she became a figure of romance and tragedy, inspiring troubadour songs and courtly literature celebrating her defiance. The imprisonment lasted until Henry II's death in 1189, when Richard I ascended the throne and immediately freed his beloved mother from captivity. At age 67, Eleanor emerged from prison more powerful than ever, serving as regent when Richard departed for the Third Crusade. She ruled England with skill and authority, proving that her political abilities had only sharpened during years of forced inactivity and reflection. When Richard was captured, returning from Crusade, Eleanor raised the enormous ransom, traveling across Europe to secure her son's release. After Richard's death, she supported John's claim to the throne against their nephew Arthur, showing her continued political acumen into old age. Even in her 70s, Eleanor remained actively involved in politics, arranging marriages and alliances to strengthen the Angevin empire she had helped create. She died in 1204 at Fontevraud Abbey at age 82, having outlived both husbands and most of her children through sheer determination. Eleanor's legacy was written in the political transformation of medieval Europe. As her marriages and rebellions reshaped the continental balance of power, she proved that women could exercise real political authority despite legal and social constraints designed to keep them powerless and subordinate. Her patronage of troubadour culture and courtly love elevated the status of women throughout medieval Europe, creating new ideals of romantic relationships. The concept of courtly love that flourished in her court influenced literature, art, and social customs for centuries, giving women symbolic power. Her sons Richard and John became legendary kings, but their reigns were built on the political foundations Eleanor had established through strategic brilliance. She demonstrated that imprisonment could not break a truly determined spirit, that 15 years of captivity could not diminish political intelligence. Her story inspired countless medieval romances and legends, transforming her into a literary figure representing female rebellion against patriarchal authority. Modern historians recognize her as one of the most politically astute rulers of her era. Male or female, whose strategic vision shaped centuries, she pioneered the idea that queens could be political partners rather than mere breeding stock. Though few successors achieved similar independence, her rebellion against both husbands established precedents for royal resistance that influenced political development throughout medieval and early modern Europe. Eleanor proved that true power comes not from titles but from intelligence, determination, and the courage to defy expectations regardless of consequences. Her marriages to two kings were strategic alliances, but her real achievement was maintaining her own identity and ambitions throughout both relationships. She redefined queenship from passive decoration to active political participation. Though her methods were often considered scandalous by contemporary standards, the empire she helped create through marriage and rebellion lasted for centuries, influencing English and French politics until the early modern period. Her court at Poitiers became a model for sophisticated royal courts throughout Europe, elevating cultural standards and intellectual discourse across the continent. She understood that women's power in medieval society required different strategies than men's, using marriage, motherhood, and cultural influence as political weapons. Her imprisonment by Henry II became a symbol of male tyranny that inspired later generations of women to resist similar oppression. Eleanor's story demonstrates that even in the most restrictive societies, exceptional individuals can transcend limitations through intelligence, courage, and strategic thinking. She lived to see the empire she had helped create reach its zenith under Richard's rule, validating her lifelong political vision. Her influence on medieval literature and culture rivals her political achievements, as the courtly love tradition she patronized shaped European romantic ideals. The woman who inherited Aquitaine at 15 and died Dowager Queen of England at 82 had rewritten the rules of medieval queenship. Eleanor of Aquitaine proved that some spirits are too strong to be contained by marriage, law, or even imprisonment by powerful kings. She remains history's greatest example of medieval female power, showing that true sovereignty comes from within rather than from crowns or titles. The queen who defied 2 kings and reshaped Europe died free, having transformed every limitation into an opportunity for greater influence. Eleanor's legacy lives in every woman who refuses to accept the limitations others try to impose, proving that defiance can be its own victory.